podcast. I'm your host, Emma Thomas, founder of Managing the Menopause and the Triple Shift. My guest today is Sophie Jane Lee, and Sophie is the author of Beyond Palatable, a manifesto for unapologetic women. She is a journalist and the founder of Electric Peach, a brand storytelling agency. And she works with founders to use their voice as a powerful business asset on stages, in the media, and through their messaging. Through her writing, talks, and live experiences, she creates spaces where people can drop the performance, speak honestly, and reconnect with the parts of themselves they learn to quieten in order to fit in. Welcome to the podcast, Sophie.
Thank you so much for having me, Emma.
Can I kick off by reading my favourite quote, or one of my favourite quotes, particularly irrelevant, I think, for my audience. And it is this: it's not uncommon for women, especially those in midlife, to feel like they're juggling multiple roles. They perform the Stepford wife routine at dinner, the doting mother at the school gates, the badass boss bitch in the office, the generous, nice, good girl who remembers birthdays, sorts thoughtful gifts, keeps up with wider family news, never stops, never sits still. Oof. I think that probably describes quite a lot of people listening. Anything to to add to that before we dive into the questions?
I think it's a really interesting cultural phenomenon for our generation, spreading from Gen X down into millennials. It doesn't really affect as much the generations around us, in that we have been brought up at the turn of the millennium to believe that we can have it all, and not even believe we can, but believe we should want to have it all. And this idea that you can do it all, sister. Woo, yeah, go get them. And I used to joke, and it's kind of a tongue-in-cheek joke, that the suffragettes really screwed over our generation, because suddenly we've got this so-called equality, but at the same time, the expectation to do everything and hold the emotional labor within the household hasn't shifted. The culture hasn't shifted, or at least hasn't for our generation. So we're currently doing so much of the unpaid labor, and then also working to achieve this ridiculous idea of success that I don't think any of us really stop and think, is this what I actually want? Is this what success really looks like for me personally? We just get onto the treadmill and enter the rat race and keep running and keep trying to keep up. And it eventually you get to a certain point where it's completely unsustainable, and the cracks that have always been there start to widen. And we live in this society that tells us that we also need to be strong and independent and resilient. And so then we internalize that as a personal failure, when really it's a systemic oppression that is impacting so many women today.
And it is very much, I think, that sort of midlife crux, whether we all start to fall off, and it is kind of whether it's because we're sort of, and I'm thinking about myself here, the sort of sandwich generation of kind of kids on one side, parents on the other side, job somewhere in the middle, relationship, maybe kind of perimenopause stuff as the kind of icing on the cake, or the sort of the straw that breaks the camel's back, if you like. And I'm just like, I cannot physically do all of these things and remain sane. And I think that is a sort of point where a lot of people would just be like, whoa, hold on.
Yeah, and it is a kind of insanity that we would ever be expected to do that in the first place. It's really pervasive, this idea of how women are supposed to be. And again, the reason that I chose those particular examples in that quote that you read out is because so much of it is about performance. It's looking like we're good at being a mother, looking like we care so much about the wider family, looking like we're such a great person who shows up with the best gift at the birthday party that we didn't even want to go to for the third time that month. And we're so conditioned to believe that our needs need to be at the bottom of the pile, and that prioritizing our needs means that we're selfish. And being selfish as a woman is one of the dirtiest things that you could possibly be, that we end up this complete broken, frayed mess because our nervous systems are completely dysregulated by constantly self-abandoning in pursuit of looking to everybody else like we have it together and that we're somehow this incredibly put together, poised person.
Flawless.
It's completely exhausting.
Yeah, it is. It's well, let's move on and talk about your very brilliant book. Presumably the title was a very kind of considered choice of using the word palatable. Why did you choose that word?
There is a lot of conversation at the moment around unlikable and a movement around being unlikable, embracing being unlikable. And I understand where it comes from because there is a lot of data that suggests that women who own their voice, who speak out, who have opinions are less likable than women who don't dull themselves down and comply and follow the status quo. However, I chose palatable rather than unlikable, which was what the question that you asked me in the kind of lead up to this, because for me, unlikable is more about the impact that you have on other people, and palatable is more a energy with which you move through the world. So being palatable is more about constricting yourself and conforming and dulling yourself down to fit into outdated expectations. And the book is about moving beyond that to take up space in your own way, whatever that might look like for you. It doesn't have to be bold and brash and burning your bra at dawn. It can be quiet and considered and really spacious. It doesn't have to look one way. But for me, being unlikable isn't the goal, because it's completely unrealistic. We live in a world that really values likability to get ahead in careers. That's not just for women, that's for men too. Of course, there's different expectations on either side. There's a lot of data that suggests people who are more likable, men and women, are more likely to get ahead. So I don't think it's fair when women are already 1 step behind, to expect them to suddenly be like, fuck it, I'm going to become unlikable. Yet at the same time, we need to start embracing the truth of ourselves and showing up as that truth so that others can do that as well. And it's really, for me, more about nervous system regulation, coming back into wholeness, understanding the ways in which we self-abandon, understanding the cost that has on ourselves and our ability to be our best selves in the world, and resourcing ourselves better and more responsibly for ourselves and as a collective, which is softer and more community focused than unlikable, which for me feels a lot more active, aggressive. It really doesn't resonate with me.
Yeah, and potentially not with a lot of people listening either, who would be like, I guess, recoil a little bit and think, I don't want to be unlikable. I do want people to like me. I just maybe want to be a bit better with my kind of setting boundaries and actually how do I put myself kind of more at the top of the tree and not kind of just be like the mat underneath the tree that's collecting all the pine needles.
Exactly. And I think it's also about liking ourselves and believing in our own worthiness and taking that cultivation of self-worth, which is a lifelong practice, really seriously, and knowing that we have as much right to have a part of the pie as anybody else in our lives does, and not always having nothing left to give to ourselves. And the other thing that frustrates me about the unlikable conversation is that it demonizes people pleasing. And I've heard an awful lot of, I'm a recovering people pleaser, as if there's something terribly wrong with me and I need to.
I'm guilty of saying that for sure.
We all are. Me too. Me too. Absolutely, me too. And it was only when I realised, because I did the training in somatics that I've done, that I understood what people pleasing actually is, which is a nervous system response. It's the fawn response to feeling unsafe. And that is learned from a really, really young age. And so demonizing yourself for your natural survival mechanism that you learned when you were a child is the opposite of caring about yourself and caring for yourself. If anything, it's much more helpful to understand that that reaction is almost certainly going to always be there because it's so deeply ingrained in your psyche. However, you can start to notice when it comes, take a minute, give yourself some love and support rather than going, I'm a people pleaser again, and choose differently. And each time that we give ourselves that space and we allow our nervous system to calm down before we take action, that is actually a much healthier way of moving through the world than pushing down our instincts, which is another form of self-abandonment.
So noticing it and naming it and being aware of it, rather than I'm going to eradicate this completely from my behaviours.
You will not be able to. If that is your natural instinct because of whatever has happened in your life that you have been taught, in order to be safe, you need to please everybody around you and manage the emotional and relational dynamics of the adults around you. That's your safety mechanism. And we can't demonize ourselves, our natural biological responses to feeling unsafe. I would even say if you're around people who make you feel consistently in that fawn response, probably you need to distance yourself from those people rather than demonizing yourself for your responses.
Interesting point. So the book is a combination of personal memoir. You're very frank about some of the kind of the incidents and vignettes from your own life that have kind of informed your writing and your thinking. There's theory in there, and there's some really nice practical exercises all the way through the book for people to kind of do some journaling, writing, thinking about each of the sort of the theories that you're talking about, and different sort of steps through. How did you kind of decide, because you work obviously in the sort of storytelling space, how did you kind of think about balancing that sort of storytelling with the more sort of academic part of the book?
I wanted it to be as accessible as possible while still looking at the depth of the issue. Because really what we're looking at is the systemic silencing of women over tens of thousands, between 12,000, 8,000 years. It's a long time and there's a lot to talk about. And I really wanted to bring across the importance of understanding that so that we come into greater awareness. But in order to do that, I know that the best way to make something accessible and engaging is to bring storytelling into it. And equally, I didn't want to write another self-help book as if I think I've got everything figured out and here I am telling you how to be better at being a person, because I don't know how to human better than anybody else. And all I'm doing really here is sharing the collection of my life's work and my life's experiences, which I think are quite unique in a lot of ways and very common in other ways. And so I knew that in order to be able to get that balance right, I would have to be brutally honest about all of the ways that I have had to learn the hard way. And honestly, there was many stories to choose from for that. And equally, I really wanted it to not just be about me and my story, because this is a global experience for women. And so then I brought in stories from other women all over the world from lots of different backgrounds to illustrate different perspectives within the context of the conversations that we were having. And that felt really important to me as well, because it's such a complicated topic and it needed to be approached with as much nuance as possible. I'm sure when I read it in 5 years' time, I'll look and see that I didn't get that 100% right, but I did my absolute best to really bring as much depth to the conversation as possible.
You've already talked a little bit about this sort of idea of self-abandonment as a kind of really core part of the issue. Was there a sort of particular turning point for you in your own life? And maybe it's one of the things that you talk about in the book from those sort of excerpts, that you kind of had this realization that you were choosing the palatability over the kind of the personal truth, and what shifted?
I have always been kind of an interesting one because behind closed doors, I was very unpalatable in my behaviors in terms of what society would deem as palatable. So I was doing a lot of drugs, had a quite serious, by the end of it, drugs and alcohol problem, had a lot of abusive relationships, and was deeply, deeply unhappy. But then on the front of it was performing success. I had a very successful career. I was always very good at driving ahead. I always did really well in my exams at both my undergrad and my master's degree. I traveled the world. I lived in lots of different places. So on the outside, if you were looking at my Facebook, you'd be like, oh my God, she's got it all together. But then if you knew me on a deep level, you'd be like, this woman is really not okay. And that juxtaposition really rubbed a lot. It was a very out of integrity way to live. And it really got to a point where my cocaine problem was completely out of control, that it was starting to impact my ability to put on this mask, and really almost destroyed my business, which was very early days at that point, 2017, 18. And I had to come face to face with the reality of that. And I had an incredible business partner at the time. She's still a very amazing friend. And she held a mirror up to me in a very kind and generous way. And that's the story that starts the book in the introduction. And was just basically called me on my shit and was like, you need to do something about this, because I can see what's going on underneath the masks and the pretending. And at that point, I realized I have really two choices: continue as I'm going and probably not be here for very much longer, or do the work and heal all of the things I was running away from and come back to myself. And in that process, I realized how much I hated myself and how much I really didn't believe that I was worthy of love or anything good. So every time something good happened, I would sabotage it because it didn't feel safe. It didn't feel right for me. And it's really sad. I just wrote an article for The Independent about this, and had to go through lots of pictures of myself from the past and going through who I am now, which is a completely different person, like almost an actually different person to who I was even just 7 years ago. Made my heart break, because I could really see it in my eyes, like always with a big smile, always like everything's fine. But you could see it in my eyes when you looked at the difference between me now and me then. You could see it in the energy that was coming from me. And now I have so much compassion and love for my past self. I can't believe how abusive I was to myself, how utterly horrible I was to myself all the time at any given opportunity. And so I'm very, very grateful for that awakening and that opportunity to see something different. And then the fact that I took those steps, which was hard and painful. But that really is the reason that I wrote this book, because I was so privileged to be able to do a lot of the work I did because I had the finances to be able to pay for it. Not everybody has that. So I wanted to give people a snapshot of all of the things that really worked for me to help them access what I could access if they don't necessarily have the resources to go and experience these different things for themselves.
Okay. So let's dive in then, because I obviously don't want to give away all of your book secrets, but I was going to kind of hone in on this, what you call your awareness, accountability, expression, expansion framework.
Mm-hmm.
How did you come to that? And is there a particular step that you think a lot of people might struggle with more out of the four?
I think everybody wants the expansion piece. Everybody wants success. And whatever that looks like, a lot of people who come to me, even introverts, they want to be seen, they want to be heard, they want to be visible as a leader within their field. And I think that is true for all of us, really. We all want to be seen and heard for who we are, really. It's a human need, I think. And yet they skip all of the other steps. And again,
through that bit. That sounds difficult and messy.
It's difficult because the most important steps are awareness and accountability. Accountability really is the most important step, but it requires awareness to be able to do it with fullness and integrity. And for me, it was realizing through my process that a lot of the ways that my life was not serving me, a lot of the really toxic parts of my life were actually created by myself. And that's not to victim blame, because a lot of that was quite abusive, but it's to become more accountable to the choices that I made and or didn't make, as the case may be, that led me through these cycles over and over again. And I started to realize that I was the common denominator in these constant relationships that were always ending really horribly, that I was the one that was actually attracting this kind of toxicity into my life. And when I was really honest with myself, there was an element of me that liked it, that actually enjoyed playing the victim. And that was really hard to come to terms with, because I don't want to. I am the victim, Emma. I am a victim. I've had all this stuff happen to me. And so actually becoming aware of the fact that I was playing that victim role subconsciously, but with
enabling
choice,
it. Yeah.
that was hard. But if I hadn't have come to terms with that, then I wouldn't have been able to change anything, because I would have stayed stuck in that role, stuck in those cycles. And so that's where the awareness piece is so important, but it's so hard, because we have to put aside our need to be right and our need to have labels, and instead think about, what is the outcome that I want to create here? Whether that's in relationships, whether that's in the experience that we have in our lives, and go for that instead of our very normal human ego-driven need to be right and to stay safe as well in that behavior. And then after that, you can become accountable to choosing differently.
And what's the? Can you explain a little bit about that expression?
So once you go through you become accountable to how you're choosing to navigate your life. The expression part is then about how you express the new way of which you're being. So with accountability and awareness, that's great. But then the expression is everything that we are in the world. So when I talk about self-expression, I think people hear it more like jazzy clothes, and I am quite jazzy, so they probably assume that that's what I mean, or being bold and loud and having an opinion and being controversial. And actually what I mean is the way in which you show up in your life, the stories you tell yourself, the ways in which you behave as a result of those stories, the relationships that you cultivate with yourself and those around you, how you choose to respond to other people when they cross a boundary, for example. All of these things come into expression, the expression of your truest self. And again, you can't get to that until you become accountable for what you actually want that to be and how you're being that's not matching up to that. So that's the expression. And then once you get to that point and you start to bring in more of the kind of opportunities that you want because you're showing up in a way that attracts those opportunities rather than in a way that attracts the opposite, you're going to come up with more challenges because the emotional cycle of change just is like that. The more that we grow, the more that we come up against our comfort zone, because our comfort zone grows with us, right? So then we go beyond that again. We then have to come up with more ways that we're actually holding ourselves back. We have to go back to being accountable again. We have to go back to being, we have to go back to being aware of that.
A continuous
accountable to then the expression of the next version of ourselves over and over and over again. And just like nature is cyclical, we're cyclical too. And there will be things that happen in our lives, tragedies that we can't foresee or that we can't do anything about, and things that create friction, which in those moments of friction, we're more likely to go back to our old patterns because they're much safer and much easier because they're the ones that we've been playing out for a lot longer. We then have to go through the process again and again. And it's just this constant work in progress.
You talk about boundaries being central to reclaiming power. And you've got some really very practical boundary scripts in there in the book, which I love. Are there sort of particular ones that you've seen land really effectively for people that you've worked with?
Boundaries are hard, aren't they? Oh my gosh. I don't want to pretend like I'm some kind of boundary queen because I find that probably the most difficult. Even writing that chapter of the book, I found it the hardest chapter to write, the one that I was least happy with and had to keep coming back to, because I just felt like, even reading my suggested responses, I was like, this is so uncomfortable. And I would say for me, the no is a complete sentence is probably the best one. And I've started just being like, oh, thank you so much for the offer, but no, I don't want to. And rather than explaining myself, because I actually feel really strongly that we need to allow people to have their no and to be able to say no without shame. Because one of the biggest challenges for women, especially in the context of self-abandonment, is we believe we have to say yes to everybody's needs. And that is completely unsustainable. And there will come a point where we will completely burn out if we do that. So now I really think about it instead of, what are my priorities in this given moment? So what do I need to prioritize? And it might not be a wholehearted yes that I'm doing it, but I'm doing it from a sense of care and yes, duty and obligation, which is also important. And these people matter to me, like my family or whatever, they need me first. They need my yes first. And I need my yes too. I have no more yeses left to give. I've given all my yeses. Sorry. No, I don't want to do that thing. I have nothing left to give. And it's actually been quite interesting. Like, I don't think I get it right. I think because I'm so awkward, I'll give you an example. I was at, every year we go away for Halloween with our group of friends. And last year it got to Sunday and I was all peopled out. There's like a big group of us, about 20 of us, kids and stuff as well. And I just wanted to leave. And it was a day early and I just wanted to go home. And I didn't feel like I wanted to make an excuse for that. And they were like, why are you leaving? It's a day early. And I said, I feel like my brain is leaking out of my ears and I need to get away from people. And it was like, that's just the honest truth. And don't get me wrong, I beat myself up about it on the way home until I just thought, why should I force myself to stay in a situation? I'm not inconveniencing anybody by not being there. I get to choose where I am, where I put myself and what energy I have to give to that. That is my right to do that. And I want other people around me to also feel like they can do that too.
Yeah. And we don't always owe people an explanation or an apology.
Yeah. The amount of people that apologize for themselves for every little thing. And I now notice it because I made a commitment probably about 2 years ago now that I wasn't going to apologize unless I actually had done something wrong. So if I open a door and there is a person on the other side of the door at the gym, for example, I'm not going to apologize to them because I just happen to be in the space. I'm just going to say, no, hi, and walk past them because there's nothing to apologize for. And I think that is really important for us all. And it's very British to start to realize how much we apologize and become really accountable to that, because I'll see it when someone is doing the most incredible thing. They might be stepping up to a microphone in one of my public speaking classes. They'll take the microphone, they'll apologize for the fact that they haven't prepared enough, even though they've had exactly the same amount of time as everybody else to do the exercise. They'll apologize for how shit it's going to be. Then they'll do something amazing. And then they'll apologize for the fact that they're still there on the stage being amazing. And I see it so often. And I would love it if women stopped apologizing.
Oh, can we set a challenge? If you're listening, for the next week, just pause before you're about to say the S word, catch yourself and see if you can not say it, unless, as Sophie said, unless you've actually done something wrong and you need to apologise to someone, in which case you're fine. So I'm going to try this. I'm going to try this for the next week. And I'm going to try and also make a note of how many times it has happened over the course of the week. It'd be really interesting. I'd love to hear from you if you do this, people who are listening, lovely listeners. If you do it, please email me and let me know. And I'll pass it on to Sophie. We'll collect some data.
Yeah, because I bet you'll be surprised. And also, I would also bet the things you actually do that really need apologising for are very, very few and far between.
Yeah. And in those cases, probably actually warrant a sort of a more fulsome sentence than just the S word. Be like,
yeah.
And it's more meaningful. It's something that's so overused it's kind of meaningless in some ways. So yeah,
exactly.
Yeah. So you talk in another section of the book about this sort of concept of embodied yes versus embodied no. You talked a little bit about it there. What advice do you have for somebody listening who kind of feels stuck between obligation and some authentic desire to do something?
The key thing with all of this is about discernment, and your own life capacity, expectations, etc. better than anybody else does. And I very don't like this expression of, if it's not a fuck yes, it's a fuck no. Like, are you kidding me? Like, what world do you live in? Because very few things really are a fuck yes for me, apart from chilling and reading my book. Not the one I wrote. I'm not like constantly constantly reading Beyond Palatable. But it's so that's just unrealistic. So that's why I talked about the embodied yes and embodied no, because the embodied yes is almost less important than, because it's rarer. Like, there aren't that many things in life, and there will be quite, hopefully there's more and more and more as you do the work. But my point is more to listen to that embodied no, when your body, and you can feel it, your body has a reaction. It's a protection mechanism. So your shoulders might go up,
brace,
you might hunch over, you feel anxious, your stomach starts to roil. And of course, sometimes that can just be some social anxiety that you need to navigate, and doesn't mean you have to shut yourself away from social environments entirely. But listening to your body's reaction is a really important part of understanding your nervous system's response to certain behaviors. And if you're constantly putting yourself into dysregulation because you're constantly doing things that create that nervous system response, that's a really unhealthy and unhelpful place to be in. And so there's a few things you can do if you have to do it. Maybe you don't have a great relationship with your husband or partner's parents, but you know, because it matters to you, because of whatever reason, that you want to be part of their lives. You might have that emotional response, that nervous system response. Taking a moment to calm yourself down, do some breathing, breathe out for longer than you breathe in, really trying your hardest to regulate yourself so that your body's not so tense for fight or flight or fawn or freeze, is a really great way of doing it. So for me, I often, before I respond to something, I'll listen to my body. I'll check in with myself and say, do I really want to do this? And if I have the choice, if it's not some kind of a family obligation, and again, obligations are a thing. It would be great if they weren't, but they are.
Live in the real world.
Yeah, exactly. But if it's, I don't know, even it could be even something like you love going out with your friends and you've been invited out for a girls' night or a guy's night or whatever it might be, and you feel actually this feeling about it at that moment. Listen to that. It might be that you actually just need to rest instead. It doesn't have to always be really dramatic. It can also just be whatever your capacity is in any given moment.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, we're not constantly overriding that sense. Sophie, if someone finishes reading Beyond Palatable, is there any one particular thing that you would like them to take away from that experience?
Oh, there's lots of things I want them to take away from that experience. The main thing is for them to realise their own innate worth and their God-given right to experience joy, and to understand that the more that they sabotage themselves or the more that they abandon their own needs, and by self-abandonment I mean not listening to their body, not responding to what their internal navigation system is telling them, the more they're disconnecting themselves from their opportunity to connect with joy and connect with themselves and connect with others. And I really, really want to start a revolution of unapologetic women who take up space and who shine their light in their own unique way, and who realize that in doing so, they're actually healing past generations and also making way for other women to do the same. Because I'm a very big believer that insecure people are mean, or that happy people aren't mean, I should say. Not all insecure people are mean, but happy people aren't mean. And the more that we can self-resource, the more that we can allow ourselves to be in our fullest expression, the more we can bring to the world and to each other, and the more we will rise together.
Well, based on what's been going on out there in the world over the last few weeks, I would say we have never needed that more than we do today.
I agree. So definitely read the book, and then we can all shine brighter together.
Indeed. And we'll put a link in the show notes. But where else can people find you, Sophie?
You can find me on LinkedIn at Sophie Jane Lee, on Instagram, Electric Peach Studios, and Beyond Palatable also has a website, beyondpalatable.com, which has lots of, or will have when the book is published, lots of resources to accompany the workbook element of the book. So any of those places you can find me.
Wonderful. Thank you so much for your time. And yeah, by the time this goes out, we'll be very close to publication day. So enjoy your book birthday.
Thank you.
And congratulations. And thank you again for coming on to talk to us.
Thank you for having me.
Thanks for listening to the Middling Along podcast. If you enjoyed today's episode, please go and leave us a review over at Apple Podcasts. You can check out the full back catalogue of all our episodes over at middlingalong.com. You can also find out more about my work as a coach. Go to www.thetripleshift.org.